Okay, so I'm having a little conversation here with a gentleman who's given us a little bit of history about the primary schools, the genesis of the primary schools in St. George's. And and around the island. He could probably tell us a little bit about it. So I like to hear this information and I like to share it. So let's listen to what he has to say.
My name is Peter Spencer. St. George's Grenada. I went to Battery School. Let me not say all this. I live in the diaspora currently.
Amen.
Like I said, I went to primary school in St. George's, and I remember going to school, the primary school I went to, which was Grenada Government School, St. George Government School, which was built in, which moved from where the current police barracks is in St. George's to Queen's Park. That took place in
so you're saying initially it was a police barracks in St. George's?
Yeah, that was
wow, interesting.
And that's where GBSS started out pretty also.
See, this is important information.
So the school moved from there to the Queen's Park in 1970, and two schools were built there. Well, two schools in St. George's. St. George's Methodist and St. George's Government. Brand new schools furnished by the Canadian government.
Wow.
They were part of a number of schools in that period, in that same era. Between, let's say, probably 68 and probably 70, 72. You have like the Cali's Government School, the Woburn Methodist School, South St. George Government School. There are a number of schools in St. Patrick. I think it's the Laddie Government School. And if you look at most of these schools, the design are similar.
Right. So that testifies to the fact that they were all built by the same people.
The same Canadian government, by CEDA projects. Even Grenada Technical and Vocational Institute in Tandy, which is no part of TAMCC.
That was also built by the
period by the Canadian government.
Or what we call GTVI?
What we call GTVI in that period was the technical part of TAMCC.
Wow.
That was built by the Canadian government. The first set of tutors there were Canadians.
Interesting.
They were twinned with us really, and students went up and students came back.
Wow.
That was the thing they had. I mean, even the same St. George Government School, before they went to Queen's Park, they had a twin with I think a high school in Canada. So that an exchange of students. Some students went up, some students came down. That before the school even left from Miller Street.
Wow.
You know? So that's a number of schools that were built. A number of schools around there.
That's
and
interesting.
Like I said, you look at the design of the schools, if you go around the country and you look at the design of some of these schools,
it's
a similar design.
Right, so you can see the impact of the Canadians.
The two schools in Queen's Park, they are similar to like a school in La Digue. Even I think there's that secondary school in St. Patrick. Have a similar design also. They all were built.
Which one are we talking about in St. Patrick?
That would be McDonald College.
So you're saying that also was part of the...
I could be questioned on that, but I'm almost certain.
Right, that is also part of the whole Canadian. So what sort of relationship did Grenada have with the Canadian government at that time that facilitated that?
I can't tell you technically what it was, but there was a serious relation based on the amount of work that was done. Even things like Central Garage later on, which was refurbished, which was originally in Tantine, where, I mean, that back then, like in the 60s, I don't want to sound too old, but in the 60s, that was in Tantine, where what we know as Teachers College, that way Public Works was, and that was then transitioned into Queen's Park. All that was done by the Canadian government. Even later on, it was developed as Central Garage Corporation. That is interesting. It
doesn't seem like we have much of that sort of cooperation these days with the Canadian government.
It don't seem that way. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it was entirely a pleasure. You explained a bit of this, and I'll definitely share it with Grenadians in the world, so they sort of know, the genesis of these schools. That's amazing. I'd like, in retrospect, thank the Canadian government for, improving the lives of Grenadians. That is amazing. Wow, awesome. Thank you again, sir.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Welcome.